This is my passion. But it wasn't always a small skateboard. At age 6, I got my very first skateboard.
Skateboard? Yeah! Daddy, I was waiting for
It was love at first sight. It would never leave my side. Until I lost it in a pond a few years later. At age 16, I got another skateboard, and it was love at first sight. One of my favorite things to do was to make things to skate on. I didn't really have much of a choice. I lived out in the country with gravel roads. So pieces of plywood and tree stumps became my ramps and obstacles. Eventually, I built some boxes and ledges to skate on. I wanted to share what I was making, so I started making YouTube videos with my iPod Touch. One of my favorite YouTubers, Sam Tabor, would make videos about this miniature skateboard called a handboard. He made it look so fun and effortless, I had to try it. I tried to make my own, and, well, my craftsmanship was lacking. However, it seemed like my audience really enjoyed it, so I bought a few, and I was hooked. It was love at first. My wife and I bought our first house, and in the basement was a workshop, the perfect place to handboard. We spent months renovating the house, which gave me two important things. One, it taught me the necessary skills to properly make and fix things myself, far better than my early days building ramps and homemade handboards. And two, I was left with a lot of offcuts. They weren't big enough to make skateboard ramps, but they were perfect for handboard ramps. I made manual pads, quarter pipes, ledges, rails, you name it. It was a great way to hone in on what worked and what didn't. It caught the attention of other handboarders, so I began to sell my best ramps. I made a website, took some photos, and had myself a side gig. In the midst of all this, 800 videos and 9 years on YouTube, I wasn't quite famous. I made the hard decision to take a break from YouTube videos. However, I was still selling ramps, so I made Instagram and TikTok accounts to show off products and handboard clips. Fate has a sense of humor because within 3 months, both accounts had over 30,000 followers, far surpassing the 4,000 on YouTube that took 9 years to accumulate. Sales went up, and the need for more space became more of an issue. It also didn't help that my wife and I had twin daughters. They needed more space too. So we moved. Our new house didn't have a great place for me to make things, so I had to build one. All the materials were delivered straight to our backyard. And of course, it immediately rained. My supervisor, Nora, had to check the materials, and they passed, barely. After marking out the 12-foot by 20-foot area, I started digging for the concrete posts. I figured this was the cheapest way to get a strong, flat surface for the foundation posts to sit on. your arms out, Nora. Good job. Patience isn't my strongest virtue. Turns out that 3 days wasn't quite long enough for the concrete to cure and hold screws. This is probably a good time to mention that this isn't a tutorial. I've never done most of this before. Lots of Googling and winging it took place on this build, especially because the plans were missing quite a few key details. Sutherland's has the cheapest shed bundles by far, and they save all that money by slapping together the very worst instructions I've ever used. I could talk about the missing measurements, calling for materials that Sutherland's doesn't include or stock, the inclusion of interior paint for the exterior, the quality of nails where the heads would break when hit by a hammer. I would tell you all about that, but I won't, because I'll never get a sponsorship deal with them. Hit me up, William M. Sutherland. Framing the walls were simple enough, and I raised all 4 sides without a hitch. Later that day, my dad and brothers all came to help. We quickly got the rafters and side panels up. Next was the roof, and this is when it really started to look like a building. After the OSB, I put up the flashing and underlayment, and then it was time for the shingles. It was rough work on the hands, but seeing the shingles line up perfectly was worth it. Next were the doors, where I completely ditched the terrible, wonderful plans, and I just winged it. Painting was next, and I went with a bright blue. And you know, it didn't quite look as bright in the store, so we're gonna redo that later. Not before we paint the entire shed the color that I don't like. I moved on to paint the trim, which looked great, and I won't repaint it, before I started working on the interior wall. This shed will be more than just my workshop, it will also be my new office. So the last 4.5 feet were sectioned off, and with this wall, framing is officially complete. Here's the new paint color, by the way, which turned out great. And here's the part of the project I'm most nervous about, electrical. I'm going to show you the least amount of my process with electrical as possible, so you can't see everything I'm sure I did wrong. Just know that I didn't get shocked, and everything worked my first try. You can hear in my reaction just how confident I was with my electrical work.
Yo! We got light! We got power!
I got internet to the shed successfully and started on the wiring inside the shed, which was tedious but rewarding. I found a window AC unit for $50 and prepped a place for it in the office. After fully boxing in the office area, I moved on to insulation, drywall, and my least favorite task in the world, mudding. That's another process I won't show you any of because I'm just so terrible at it. In between coats of mud drying, I began to work on my new desk, which is just some plywood and MDF glued together with a walnut veneer. To save space, I used cleats on the wall of my office to hold up the desk instead of legs. As I built this soon-to-be workshop, I couldn't help but dream about all the time I would spend in this small space, designing, building, creating, making. It made me realize all of my passions I've grown to love have one thing in common, and that is to make. From making skateboard ramps, to YouTube videos, to terrible handboards, back to ramps, to this shed, nothing quite brings me joy like the process of making things with my own two hands. Thank you for listening to my story. My goal is to be a full-time maker, and I'm giving myself 1 year to make that happen, to work as hard as I can on this project. So July 16th, 2024, we'll look back at the entire year and break down all of the numbers together. If you're interested in supporting this project, there's a few ways you can do that. The first way is to purchase something off of my website. I also accept custom orders via email if you have an idea for something unique. Patreon is where you can get more content with benefits like extra videos, director's commentary, your name at the end of future videos, and more. If you'd like to support me for free, the best way to do that is to share this video or any of my future videos with a friend that enjoys making things. Until next time.